Offering. It's about to go.
And good morning.
Okay. Grand Rising.
Grand Rising.
How is everyone doing? I'm doing well. I'm here with my awesome coach, Courtney, and we're going to be doing something fun today. Um, I'm really excited and also a little nervous because I'm going to be vulnerable and actually do a coaching session live so that everyone can see what a mini coaching session looks like in a specific topic. Today we're going to be talking about RESTORY, and I'd love for Courtney just to explain the concept from her perspective as she has walked me through this in the E3 program I'm in with her right now.
Sure. So RESTORY, I always begin this lesson by saying this was probably the most important lesson that I have ever learned and have ever taught. If we can RESTORY our life, we have now just created the new life. We've now just created our new self. And so of all of the exercises that I teach and all of the exercises that I do myself, RESTORY to me is by far the most powerful and the most transformational. And so it begins with recognizing that we have a victim story. We were victims of something at some point. And sometimes it's victim of somebody else, but sometimes it's something that we've even done to ourselves. And so we start with that story. But the idea is in the RESTORY is to find the turning point where you said no more. And at that turning point, then where did you go from there? And then when you reflected back on it, who are you now because of what you went through? Who can you stand up and say, now I am because? And that's the RESTORY part. And so it's essentially finding your victim story and turning it around to a story of power. And so that's the basic premise of the story.
Oh, wow. So, as you were speaking, I was flashing through several different points. So, yeah, how should we get started with this so that just for everyone's awareness, I have done this already. I'm in the E3 coaching program with Courtney right now. And the reason why I wanted to go live and be vulnerable is because I really feel the possibility of so many other people, whether it's with Courtney or not, whoever it is, just taking on a higher level of personal development that will ripple out to transformation for humanity, because that is my stand for the world, and really creating, being the change I wish to see, and working on inner development. A lot of the shadows I had, I wouldn't say hid from, but kind of worked on, but not to the fullest. And now I'm just diving really deep and really looking at the deepest way I can heal myself and love myself enough to face the shadow and love the shadow, specifically with this RESTORY concept. I've worked on it before and actually practiced it through many different ways, and I'm working with Courtney now to take it to the next level. So where should we start here? I'm ready to be coachable.
So let's start just by sharing with the audience that anybody who knows you knows that you've been doing personal development for years, right? And so when I get people coming to me, they say, well, I don't want beginner stuff. I don't want to do what I've done before. And here's the thing is, this is not for beginners necessarily, but it is, because we do keep coming back to the same place, right? We keep coming back to the same lesson. We keep coming back to the same story. But each time we come back to it, it's an upward spiral. And that's how E3 was developed, was to take you through an upward spiral of, yes, you're going to keep coming back to the same point, but each time you come back, you have a greater level of awareness. And that's why doing these exercises over and over again and repeating them from the higher level of awareness actually helps you to get to a deeper level of healing. And so I just wanted to note that for people who are watching and they say, oh, but Morel has done so much work. She's already, this is for everyone. It doesn't matter what point you're at. So I have probably at this point 7 to 10 RESTORYs of my own life. And when I'm stuck in that downward spiral, RESTORY is what I go to pull myself out of it. And so what I'd like to offer to you, to you, Moral, is what story are you ready to heal?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm ready to fully let go of, like, I don't even identify with it anymore. I've been naming it and actually calling it for what it is for a while now as I've been healing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that I'm a thriver, or I guess that I'm a victim of domestic abuse. Like,
Okay.
even saying those words, like, not, I think it's partially that, one, it's like hard for me to admit that, just like
Yeah.
healing my old ways of wanting to have a facade that like nothing's wrong in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely there, but less so than ever, thankfully. And then also just because I don't identify with it more, thankfully. That's not a part of my reality now. I feel safe, more safe and empowered than I ever have in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm almost like ready to, like, if I ever refer to it, it's just like it's a past self. It's not even like who I am anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like moving into, like you've shared, being a thriver of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
But even like just a thriver, not even having to have the second part, because
Right.
you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've talked
Yeah.
about this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So where you are now is a beautiful place, but it's also important to recognize that we do have a past self who was there, right? We do, that is part of our story. And it's not something that is ever going to go away,
Hmm.
but it is something that can be restoried. And so by completely avoiding it, that's not healing.
Right.
And that's where I think some people, maybe get confused, is they think, well, I just won't have any emotional attachment to it. Well, now you're shutting down one of the most powerful aspects of yourself, which is your emotional self. And so it is important to get into the emotional self of who was the victim. And it may not be you anymore with a new self-image, but there was a Moral Cooper. Would that be right?
Yeah,
The right
that's, I
name?
was just thinking of that. I literally had a different name. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a Moral Cooper who was a victim of domestic violence. And so we start with that story. Can you tell us, and just, you don't have to go into any detail that you don't feel comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but would you be willing to just give us a minute or so of what that story was, that victim
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, and everyone who knows me online here is I'm very vulnerable and an open book, being an author and authorship coach. So I'm an open book, and I'm being the change we wish to see with transparency, and I feel safe and comfortable to share. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I'd say it really became apparent to me that that I was suffering in that situation of domestic violence when my sister and dad were like constantly asking me, like, are you sure? Is everything okay?
Mhm.
And yeah, I just remember so many times they would be like, are you sure? Are you sure? Over the phone and in person. And I'd be like, yeah, it's fine.
Mhm.
And or I'd make up excuses for my first husband, and all these things. And it's like, it's obviously there's still emotion there, just because I just spiritually bypassed it for so long. Like, I just did not want to admit to anyone what was going on. And I had friends that would ask me and sense it sometimes, because either just they could sense it in me, or they had witnessed certain behaviors or words being said to me that were unkind and stuff in person. So yeah, I'd say it just went from, just anger to times where I would feed in and get angry as well. And just what situations that probably could have been resolved, I got angry too. And then, closing, slamming doors. And then it turned into, not, kicking a door down of that I was behind. And then it became physical.
Mhm.
And it just became like this, from a spiritual perspective, this perfect storm of victim and bully. Like, I played right into that, and then I got to perpetuate that over and over again. And then we'd come to forgiveness, and thankfully that existed, but then it became like this ebb and flow. And I know this story is mirrored for so many other people who go through the same thing. And then, as many people know, and thankfully thankfully that the forgiveness did get to be like the way that our physical friendship got to end the note on. Even before his own death and suicide, there was really a space of forgiveness between us, and like, let's just put that in the past and let it be. But you know, just the path to get there was really challenging. Like, one time when I was on vacation, I actually wrote about this recently in the co-authorship Courtney and I are part of, where I was like looking in a mirror and putting concealer on that my friend had just handed me. She was obviously aware of it because she was on vacation with us. And I was looking in the mirror, putting concealer on my black eye that I had gotten the night before so that we could go on a boat. And this was in the bathroom of the marina in Puerto Vallarta. And I saw my eyes in the mirror, and it was like my future self looking at me. And she was like, "What the heck are you doing? Why are you pretending this didn't happen?" And then I've heard her, even I saw her eyes, and my friend next to me, I feel like she saw that too and sensed it. And then the next thought, my ego voice was like, "Well, we have to get on the boat. Like, we don't have time for this. Like, we came for this vacation." And so that's just one of many different scenarios that I could express, where I felt terrified for my life several times, whether it was in a moving vehicle or in a home or an Airbnb or wherever it was. And yeah, it just feels like, even as I say this story, it just feels very much like, it feels like big. And I think that's what you were referring, is like that, those emotions, like to acknowledge them. There's this part of me that wants to just be like emotionally unattached, just forget about it. And I'm acknowledging that.
Yes. Yes. Good for you. Can you name us some of the emotions that you felt during that victim part of your story?
Just terror,
Yeah.
almost for moments. Thankfully, they would go away once I got back to safety, but moments of like, it would just be better to die right now, of just like, and it wasn't even that thankfully I never like even felt super depressed, because I always had my other things in life that I look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
But that I would, yeah, just terror. And I guess in an emotion, it would be like, um, not, what's the word when you just want to give up? There's like an emotion.
There's apathy, but I
Yeah,
think there's
almost like
something deeper
apathy. It
than
was
that.
kind of like apathy, like fearful apathy. Um, Also, whatever word feels like just fake, because I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, there's people in my life who are concerned and obviously aware, but they're waiting for me to finally be the one that made the choice, which I finally did one day. So yeah, I'd say those are the biggest emotions. And on the same note, by no coincidence, another fellow gal in our program, ED program, later today, I'm finally doing my first EMDR session, which is going to be a really powerful connection with this work as well, where I'm going to actually let myself go back to those moments and
Mm-hmm.
using the power of neuroscience, actually like reprogram some of those neural nets in my brain that I know are there.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I don't think they're as bad as they were if I completely was the first time I've ever addressed this, but I definitely know there's going to be a lot of emotion of basically fear and terror were the
Yeah.
biggest.
Did you ever get to a point of despair, hopelessness, anything along those
Yeah,
lines?
I mean, I guess so. Um, it was never like I went, other than, actually, there were times, I think I told you this once, where after a horrible fight, I would be driving, and it was like I was still in that energy of like, gosh, how did I get myself into this? And having thoughts, thankfully, never acted on, of like, it'd be better to just crash my car into the median right now. Like, I could just do that. So, and it feels really good to voice that. And I don't feel shameful about voicing that, because I know that if I'm having those thoughts, it means there's many others that are. So it's important for me to voice those, put a voice to those past thoughts. And so, yeah, I'd say hopelessness for sure as well.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. And now tell us more about the thoughts, the reoccurring thoughts that were going through your head as you were in this system.
Yeah. Um, Letting myself go back there.
Yeah.
like, how will I ever get out of this? How will I ever be free? Like, I felt like I would just always be afraid of what I was going to say, or like that, walking on eggshells. And that was the number one comment friends and family would always give me, is like, it just seems like I remember my sister saying it to me once, and I think I kind of took it from her, but then in the next breath just proceeded to deflect and defend. So yeah, I'd say, how will I ever get free? It's just what I like. Also, kind of like a resignation. Like, well, you chose this, so you're just gonna have to keep finding a way. And there's also this unfortunate thought of like, I can't leave him because he might kill himself, which unfortunately became in a one sense, like obviously not the reason, and I know that's not the reason, but that's my greatest nightmare, and also like, oh, I want to help him get his dad out of prison, and then I do love him, I'd go back to that, because I did, and I still do in spirit. Is my spiritual friend. So yeah, there's so many layers of like, there wasn't very much anger towards him, which I finally like let out actually after his death. And I feel like I've processed through a lot of that, because I actually, through my spiritual beliefs, had communicated with him and let out anger and said like, gosh, it made me mad when you did this. It made me mad the way you left. And so being able to be real about that really helped. And I actually did like actual martial art movements as I was doing some of these things to get out that anger. It felt good. But in the moment but also there were thoughts sometimes that I feel guilty about, of like, it'd be better if he was just gone. And that is something that really hurts to admit. So those are some thoughts.
I really want to thank you and point out the extent of your vulnerability right now, because these are not easy things to talk about, and they're certainly not easy things to admit, and you are doing such a beautiful job of going through it. And I just want to share, so if you want to just take a breath for a moment, and I'll share with the audience now, what we're essentially doing is we're going into a dark room with a flashlight. And what we want to do is shine the flashlight everywhere we can, in every corner, at every thought that we had, every memory we have, every emotion that we had. That's why we're going through, name the memories, name the emotions, name the thoughts. Because as we do that, as we shine the flashlight on it, we're bringing it up so we can transmute it and release it. Okay, so there's going to be people who are watching this saying, but no, we're supposed to be thinking positive. We're supposed to be only saying positive things. We're not supposed to be telling the bad story and the dark story. And that's what we call toxic positivity, right? Because these things did happen. It is part of your story. We're not going to sit here and pretend that it didn't happen. And we're certainly not going to avoid it, because that's what packs it away and stores it down in your body. And anybody who is familiar with this work understands that as you're packing these things down into your body, they turn into arthritis, they turn into cancer, they turn into autoimmune diseases. We're releasing this energy so it doesn't have to happen to your body. So thank you so much for being willing to go there and be vulnerable. Now we get to turn it around. So talk to me about the moment. Okay, and there's always a moment. So there's this beautiful saying about change. Change happens in an instant. The preparation for change is what takes time.
Whoa. So, can you say that again?
Sure. Yep. Change happens in an instant. The preparation for change is what takes time.
I'm writing that down.
Okay, so
feeling that describes my last few years.
What?
I feel like I'm ready for the instant. Like I really am.
Yeah.
I've done the work.
Yep. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this one phrase, we can do an entire, course on this one phrase. But for this moment to stay in the RESTORY, what was the moment that you were actually aware of and ready to make the change? What was that moment?
Yeah, I think about this moment a lot. I remember the date, September 16th, 2019, and my son was 6 months old. And I was in the basement of my parents' house with my son. He was playing in the little play yard, and I was with him, and I was FaceTiming with Clint, and he was in Denver because at the time he just basically for most of Leo's life while we were still together, which was just 6 months, he was just not around a lot, and he was in Denver, and so I can't even remember why, and I think it was, now looking back, he was probably on some kind of substance, and he was just being suddenly all of a sudden cruel. Like we were having a fine conversation, and then can't remember what it was. I think I was sharing like a struggle or something with work, and he called me a really negative word that we had a promise that he wouldn't say, starting with a C. And I was just like, no, you can't call me that, because I started just weeks prior getting these videos from my beautiful friend Megan about boundaries and speaking my boundaries. And it's just suddenly, so I guess it was weeks prior to this moment, my spirit started saying, you need to listen to this. You need to listen to this. And it hurt. But I was like, you know what? It was because of my son that made me have the motivation. It wasn't just me anymore. It was like, do I want my son to endure this one day? Yeah. And so I finally started listening to these videos about healthy boundaries, and it started just giving me this strength and courage. And as he called me those names, I said, no, you can't call me that anymore. You cannot. And I didn't say it meanly or angrily. I was just like, no, this is not okay. And then just kind of in a brash statement, he said, well, then let's get a divorce. And I said, okay, yes. Whereas in the past, when he would go towards that, I would say, no, 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 please. And now I was just like, okay, it's done. And it was like kind of a weird conversation, because he's like, okay. And I'm like, okay, well, talk for a little more. And then we hung up. And then he came in person, and, it just, I could share more, but basically it was like kind of done for both of us. And then after about a month or so of that, which we felt both okay with. And then, of course, there were conversations he had to me about, oh, well, actually, never mind. And I just kept holding strong. No, this is the choice we made. This is best. This is best for Leo. This is best for us. And I just, sometimes it would be angry, but I would stay calm, and I'm so proud of myself. I haven't really ever acknowledged how proud of myself I am, that I stayed peaceful always.
Yeah.
Even like when we were married, and there were times where I wish I wouldn't have like fed into it, I was still overall very peaceful. There was times where I physically pushed back that I wish I didn't. Sometimes just trying to, close a door. But then, and especially after Leo was born, I was always peaceful. I was always peaceful. Even when it was really hard to stay peaceful, I would take a breath and I would say, nope, this is what's best. We're not getting back together. We're going to be friends. We're going to be co-parents. And just part of my RESTORY that I sometimes wish I could, which would be changing the past, obviously, is that I wish we could have been co-parents longer than we were. Because some of you listening know that he did die by suicide a year after we separated. And I see friends that are co-parenting now peacefully, that are my friends, both of them still my friends, one particularly I have in my mind, and they're friends and co-parents, and I tell them both all the time, like, I just love seeing you, and they knew Clint too, and I love seeing you two work together. And they're like, yeah, it's not always easy, but we're making it work. And I'm just like so grateful that that is out there in the world. And but I know with the RESTORY, it's about me, and it's about what I can control now, and it can't change the past. So I love this process so much, because and I love that I love it, that I love even crying in front of others, because that's part of one of my superpowers, is vulnerability and honoring grief and dense emotions, which I never thought would be one of my superpowers. I talk about it in the co-authorship Courtney and I are a part of, that I used to be the toxically positive and still find myself sometimes going there person where I, to myself and others, just when, I was listening, but listening to fix and change,
Mm-hmm.
or listening, or not listening and just jumping straight to, oh, just think of the positive.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm defining myself as someone who honors those dense emotions within myself and the collective. And that feels so good and on purpose.
Good. Good. And now, just to bring you back, I want you to go back to the one moment where change became possible, right? Because if you remember before that, the thought was, how am I ever going to get out of this? How am I ever going to find my freedom? But there was one moment where change became possible. And I want you just to zero in on that moment and get into that moment and describe only that moment. Just essentially put parentheses
Yeah.
around. Describe that moment to me.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing me back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, the thought was, now is the time. And I actually have a card right here that I pulled yesterday, but it's the opportunity card.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like, it actually, I remember there was something along the lines of that thought, like, now is your opportunity. Because unfortunately, it was a situation where, and not necessarily, but for me in that mindset, it was like, you have to take this opportunity because he's the one that said, let's end it. So now say yes. Say yes. Actually, yeah, that's because that's what I said. I literally said, yes, okay. So I'd say that was the thought of
Okay.
moving from all that to say yes, take this opportunity, free
Okay.
yourself, free yourself.
Change happens in an instant. You see that?
It
Okay.
was an instant right then for sure.
Yeah. And then that's where our perception shifts. Okay. So now we have the moment, we have the actions that take us out of what it was that we were in. And then we move into the reflection. So sitting here today as Meraldo Renee Jones and looking back on that, who are you now because of what you went through?
I am someone who is able to stand in solidarity with people who are going through or have gone through similar things,
Mm-hmm.
which gives me a lot of connection ability with people I might not have been able to before.
So I want to
Um,
pause you there for a moment.
okay.
Okay. Beautiful, beautiful to be able to feel that solidarity with other human beings. But we want in this moment to take away any label that would change if other people didn't exist.
Mm,
So the label of mother, daughter, sister, brother, wife, husband, right? Those labels. And then it goes into your job, teacher, doctor, lawyer. Those labels all exist because of other people. So I want you to find who you are separate right now, and I truly believe the grandest illusion of life is that we are separate from others. However, in this moment, it's important for you to be able to identify who you are because of this, not in relation to other people.
yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. That's my tendency to jump to that. It makes sense. So I am I'm unbreakable. I guess unbreakable implies that someone could break me though. Let's see. I am I am whole. Like I really truly feel whole.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was all like external, like I was reaching externally
Mm-hmm.
for validation. And now, like, especially in my marriage now to my husband Garrett, like we are, and I'm so grateful that I created myself and resonated what I need to resonate him into my life, because we have even talked about we don't need each other. We've
Mm-hmm.
said that.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels really good. It's like we choose each other. And so yeah, I feel I am whole and um independent,
Mm-hmm.
and just I love myself. I do. And that feels good to say. And I'm finding new levels of that every day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. What did you discover about yourself because of your experience?
Well, in the challenging perspective, I discovered that I often will put um, even my own safety in life will be below my desire to look good, to
Mm.
avoid looking bad and looking good. That's a phrase I got from the Landmark Forum, is that we humans will do everything we can to avoid looking bad and look good. And that's what I realized, is that that I that I put that above all. And so when I notice even a tiny bit of that now, I'll really put it in check, because I'm not willing to go back to that being a huge part of who I am. And, you know, thankfully, even as I was being that, I was still out there doing great things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like my level to create change within myself and the planet is like exponentiated, because I'm coming from inside, from within, to go
Mm-hmm.
without, versus needing the outside to define my inside.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. So essentially, in the restory part, what we want to look at is, who did I become? What did I discover about myself? And what lessons did I learn? And I think you beautifully wrapped up. And if you have more, share more. But you beautifully wrapped up. What did you discover about yourself, and what lesson did you learn? Really, with what you just said, is there more?
I mean, it's that's like the biggest part of it. And now I know who I am, to now, like, taking it a step further, now that I know who I am, independent and not needing anyone else,
Mm-hmm.
now I can more holistically go out and be the authorship coach, go be the creativity coach, and help people discover who they are,
Mm-hmm.
independent of anyone else as well. Um, yeah, especially with your help. I've been so grateful for almost 10 years now that you've been a coach with me, a coach friend and mentor. And that's why I wanted to go live today and actually show a mini coaching session with this restory concept, because imagine if we could restory for the collective of humanity. And I love that your perspective of restory doesn't mean you're like erasing what happened. In fact, you're honoring what happened and reading what happened. And as
Mm-hmm.
an author, I see it as us all collectively sitting around a quill and ink and a beautiful blank page of a book, and all saying, like, yes, humanity went through these traumas. We went through seeing ourselves as separate. And now we're writing the story of, we are seeing ourselves as together and powerful in our diversity and in our unity. And
Mm-hmm.
we are collectively moving from survivor to thriver.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. I mean, imagine, take specific points in history. If we were able to restore slavery as a collective,
Oh my God.
imagine the transmutation of energy that could happen for our nation, for our world, by restoring that particular story of our history. I've had to restore my experience of COVID, and
Oh.
have a new perspective, a new outlook, because I went, like many others, I went into a beautiful place of conspiracy theory, and it didn't serve me. It didn't serve me, and so I've had to restore and recognize, the anger that I felt. Well, that's toxic soil within my system, right? And so restoring that, restoring relationships. Take a look at any relationship that you still feel anger, resentment, um, any type of negative, toxic thoughts towards, and restory that relationship, right? It's all part of forgiveness. That's what it
Mm,
comes down to. Is
mm,
this is how, when people say, well, how do I forgive? This is how. This is how you forgive, because this is what sets you free. When you can take a look back at the story and say, I'm grateful for my experience, and my story is similar. I don't have to say that I'm grateful for the time that the knives were thrown at me. I don't have to say that I'm grateful for the fear that I felt in the car when I thought I was going to die multiple times. But I can look back and say, I'm grateful because of who I am now, because I learned that I have a voice, because I learned that I can, like you, I can take this story and I can help others heal from it. Right? So I'm grateful for the fact that I went through what I went through. And that's how I know that I've forgiven. That's my freedom. And no longer do I have to be someone else in his presence. Right? Have you ever noticed that if you're in the presence of someone that you have some sort of negative emotion towards, you change who you are, how you're showing up? Your voice changes, the way you talk changes, the words you use change, right? That means that person has power over you. You have now lost your sovereignty because you've allowed that person to dictate who you are and how you're showing up.
That relates so much to what you said about restoring the global shift of 2020, which is part of my restory. I call it the global shift of 2020.
I love it. Yeah.
And that I'm going to take that on because I have been doing it in some sense, but specifically how I can get angry sometimes when I see certain world leaders, some of which aren't like really in the sphere anymore, but certain health leaders that would say certain things, and I would get all like up in arms. And I see that that's part of me allowing that my sovereignty to be taken away. So I'm going to take that on as home play to notice that and restory in those moments. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Courtney, for doing this live session with me. And I am creating the possibility that there's people who are touched, moved, and inspired by this to try it on themselves, to restory. And like I said, I've seriously been working with Courtney for almost 10 years, and I plan to for years to come. And she's also someone that we've collaborated with in co-authorship, The Sacred Feminine, and now we're doing another co-authorship, Circle of the One. So we're colleagues as well. And I also open myself to receiving coaching from her because she has just truly changed my life. So her website's right down there, Crystal Clarity Life Coaching. Is there anything else you'd like to say for people to find you?
Well, it's easy to find me on Facebook. I have a personal page. I also have the Crystal Clarity business page and the Illuminators, which is a private group, but I would love for anyone to request to join. There's 2 questions. And all I want to know is, how are you spreading your light in this world in order to become an illuminator? Everyone has a light, and that's something that I think we forget. And we're taught that that's not true, or to shy away from it, or to deny it. Oh, well, if you step into your light, well, that's going to make somebody else feel bad. And that's that's false information that we've been given. And so what my mission is, especially with illuminators, is to bring to light the fact that each one of us has our own spotlight. And as we turn it on, it lights up the world more. And so the tagline for it is be the light that sets the darkness free. And that's what we're here to do. So if anyone's interested specifically in the E3 program that Maral was mentioning, and that's where this exercise comes from, you can find that on my Facebook as well. You can read about it and then set up a consultation with me, which is completely complimentary. And we can find out if you're ready for this kind of work, because not everybody's ready for it.
And E3 is?
Empower, Enlighten, Evolve. 3-phase
Empower,
process.
enlighten, evolve. Let's all power, enlighten, evolve humanity. And on that note, namaste, aloha, aho, ashe. Love, love, love.